Tuesday, August the 10th, but hope you guys are doing well. Hope all is well. I did not know if I was going to be able to live stream today or not, but Chris Wyatt is in Colorado. A lot of my viewers and his viewers are the same viewers, and I'm doing my own news broadcast and my own live stream. I agree with Chris on most things, but I don't always agree with Chris all the time. But as usual, probably a lot of people will not be watching this live stream live, but then when it gets uploaded, my live streams tend to do reasonably well and people watch it there. So let's get into some news, particularly in Africa, but not just in Africa, but all over the world. Now, in Ghana, recently they have dropped the charges of 21 LGBTQ people. It was 16 women and 5 men, and they met at this hotel to discuss books about being gay or being transgender. And Ghana has tried to make homosexuality a crime. To the best of my knowledge, I think it still is a crime in Ghana, Africa. Well, the police had arrested this 21 people, but the Ghanaian Supreme Courts have dropped the charges on these people. And as much as I don't agree with that activity of homosexuality or transgender, it should not be illegal. That is somebody's personal choice, and I'm glad that the charges were dropped against those 21 people. So good job to the Ghanaian courts for doing that. Now, the topic, even though the Olympics are over, the closing ceremony has taken place, and Japan has recently given the flag to France, the Olympic flag to France, because the 2024 Summer Olympics will be in Paris, France. Well, South Africa had brought home some medals, but overall it was a disappointment. But Tatiana Schoenmaker had won the 200-meter breaststroke, women's breaststroke, and she set a world record for it, got the gold medal. And then Bianca Buitendag had won the silver medal for women's surfing. Well, the South African Olympic Committee, the Sports and Olympic Committee, SASA, South African Sports and Olympic Committee has decided not to give these people their Olympic bonuses or any athletes that have won the medals. And they say it's because of South Africa's poor showing in the Olympics, but it's more than likely because the athletes that won the medals were white South Africans, and there's a lot of anti-white bias in the ANC. Now, there are rumors that they are going to pay the people, but they're not going to tell anybody, and I hope that rings true. I mean, if the Tatiana Schoenmaker and Bianca Buitendag definitely deserve their medals, and anybody else who won the medals, regardless of what race, creed, or color they are. They represented their country. They won the medals, and it's customary in South Africa to give Olympic medal winners a bonus when they return to their home country. And it shouldn't be canceled this year because the majority of the athletes that won it were white South Africans. That is just outright reverse apartheid, and that's not something Madiba had wanted. So that should not be going on. All right, talked about Ghana, talked about what is going on in South Africa with the Olympic Committee. Now, other people have talked about this, but I'll talk about it again. Zuma, there does not need to be another Zuma president in South Africa. Dudu Zane Zuma, the son of former South African president Jacob Zuma, says he's going to run for president of the ANC against Cyril Ramaphosa. And typically, whoever ends up being president of the ANC ends up being president of South Africa. Jacob Zuma had left South Africa as South African president with a 17% approval rating. And pretty much the only popularity he had was in KwaZulu-Natal, which is his home province. That's just not acceptable for that to happen. Well, Dudu Zane Zuma says he's going to run against Cyril Ramaphosa, and he might very well win. I mean, people think he doesn't have a chance. Well, the ANC is split, as most people know. They're split between the pro-Zuma faction and the pro-Ramaphosa faction. And the he's still acting Secretary General. Well, he's still Secretary General, though he's been suspended. Ace Magashula, who could conceivably have more power than Cyril Ramaphosa, even though he's been suspended from his position. Ace Magashula is on the pro-Zuma faction. So this could very well happen. This is why, I mean, South Africa has some democratic things, but for the most part, it's a parliamentary system when it comes to their president. They have a parliament, and the majority party in the parliament basically chooses the president. That's typically what happens. And that is what's basically going on right now. And this is the same Zuma, and Duduzane Zuma was with Jacob Zuma on a lot of this. State capture with the Gupta family in South Africa. The Gupta family has fled South Africa to face, because if they had stayed, they would have faced criminal charges. This is also the same Duduzane Zuma whose father is in jail. Jacob Zuma is in jail for failure to appear in court. He faced charges on state capitol. He said he was innocent, but then he failed to appear in court. And if he was innocent, which I don't believe he is, he would have appeared in court, and the courts would have believed him. But that didn't happen. So that has gone on. All right, so, okay, talked about that. Recent studies in the Voice of America, which is the only government state-controlled media network that America has, is called the VOA, the Voice of America. They have reported that the Johnson & Johnson vaccine has actually been good for South Africa. The Johnson & Johnson vaccine gives a 71% kill rate to the Delta variant, which basically means if you get the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, you have a 71% chance of not getting the Delta variant. But even if you get the Pfizer or Moderna vaccine, it's around, I think, 50% on the Delta variant, but it's almost always a light case if you get the Pfizer or Moderna vaccine for the Delta variant. And the Delta variant is not going to affect you typically bad where you will need to be hospitalized or die from it. Here are some statistics out of Alabama, the state of Alabama, in regards to the COVID-19. 96% of the recent COVID-19 deaths have been people who have not been vaccinated. And that includes 94% of the hospitalizations. There have been people who have not been vaccinated, unvaccinated people. Well, the 94% of the 6% of people who have been vaccinated that have been hospitalized, typically they just have to be on oxygen for a couple of days, and then typically they're able to go home. Not always, but typically they are. And with the unvaccinated people, it's very, very unpredictable for their situation. So, in Mississippi, similar statistics from the most recent COVID-19 deaths from January to mid-July. 98.4% of those deaths were for people who chose not to get the vaccine or for people who are unvaccinated. Now, if you've had prior allergic reactions to vaccines in the past or are allergic to a lot of medications, doctors advise you not to get the vaccine or to make an appointment with them first, and the doctor will consult you about your options. That's typically the case. Okay, Tony Nagy says, I had the bug. My antibodies are stronger than any vax out there. Well, good for you, but I will say this. I'm not a doctor, but doctors typically advise, even if you've had the bug, don't get the vaccine right away after you've been recovered, but then wait a few months and get the vaccine. It's still advised because there have been plenty of people that have had the COVID-19 more than once. The president of Brazil, Jair Bolsonaro, had it about 3 or 4 different times. But best wishes to you, Tony Nagy, and I hope the antibodies do their work. And I hope that you are, stay safe. Well, I mean, I'm not going to name names, but we've typically had people in this state who are very anti-vaccine, and they have since changed their minds, and some of them have gotten the vaccine because the bug is just so prevalent right now. I mean, schools reopened just a couple of weeks ago, but then there's some schools in Mississippi that have closed down again and have gone to virtual learning. I hate that for the kids, not being able to see their friends and get out of the house and learn social skills with people other than their parents. But at the same time, I can understand why they did that, because they're trying to keep the COVID-19 from spreading. So I can see both sides of it. I can see both sides of the argument on that. That's just what's going down. Now, here's some news out of France. And this is why Europe has failed immigration policies. Okay, failed immigration amongst Europe. Okay, Paul Kagame in Rwanda has kind of ran a dictatorship a little bit. But some of the people that have sought asylum under Paul Kagame's rule in Rwanda have been people who were worse under the previous regime, under the juvenile Habyarimana. Sorry if I pronounced the name wrong. Here's the thing. there was a Rwandan refugee that stabbed a French priest, and this French priest basically took the Rwandan refugee in. And here's the other thing. He was out on parole. This refugee was out on parole for burning down a cathedral. He didn't get a heavy sentence. He was a refugee in Paris, and this is what happened. This is Marie Le Pen, who is going to challenge Emmanuel Macron in France for the presidency. And I'm not a fan of either one of them, but I think Marine Le Pen is going to be a better president than Emmanuel Macron. And one of the reasons she's got such high popularity right now, many people don't agree with her far-right views, but the reason she has such high popularity at the moment is because she's one of the few politicians in Europe that is going to stand up to this failed mass migration policy that has plagued Europe for decades. And a French priest who took a Rwandan refugee in out of the goodness of his heart, who was already out on, and the refugee was already out on parole for burning down a cathedral. Well, the priest got stabbed and killed, basically. And Marine Le Pen is not going to let this crisis go to waste. I mean, rather if I agree with that or not, she's going to use this as an example to challenge Emmanuel Macron's failed, not just him, but all of the European Union's failed mass migration policy. Sweden is another one. If you go to Malmo, Sweden, it is majority non-Swede, and it is not the safest place for Swedes to be in. There are Somali refugees that had legitimate claims to go to Sweden and lived in Malmo, and some of them recently returned to Somalia because Somalia, they said, was safer than what they were having to deal with in Malmo, Sweden. And any of the refugees in Sweden that now commit crimes, it's going to be hard to track them down unless the police witness the crime, because on the most wanted posters and the most wanted ads and stuff, you can't list their race or ethnicity. And that is just outright asinine that is going on. And there have been a few really wealthy Swedes that have gone and given up their homes to let these refugees live in them, like apartments, and it's like mansion homes, but the refugees still complain, or some of the refugees do, like it's not enough. There have been refugees that have sought legitimate asylum and say that the Swedish government needs to tighten down on it, that there are a lot of refugees that refuse to assimilate, they refuse to learn Swedish, and they refuse to try to be a productive member of society. And not all of them are like that. There's a lot of them that aren't, but the ones that aren't are telling the Swedish government, you need to crack down on this mass migration because we're in the minority here of refugees that want to do the right thing. You don't believe me? Go look at Sweden's mass migration policy and Sweden's mass migration policy failures. I mean, that's just what's going on in Europe at the moment. Now, with Namibia, their SWAPO government has always been typically a key ally to the ANC in South Africa. Now, the LPM, which is called the Landless Peoples Movement, they are a lot like the Economic Freedoms Fighters Party in South Africa. But the Landless Peoples Movement allow white members, and they support EWOC, but not to the degree where it's on racial terms as much, and they don't go engage in the race-based narrative, which probably means the Landless Peoples Movement will take away enough votes from SWAPO where Namibia's moderate opposition party can become the majority party. Because Hage Geingob had tried to engage in some race-baiting politics, and the majority of black Namibians did not like what he was doing. And Hage Geingob went with the AstraZeneca vaccine, but the AstraZeneca vaccine is ineffective against evolved strands of the COVID-19. And even though him and his wife have had the AstraZeneca vaccine, which is only 30% effective against the South African strain of the COVID-19, him and his wife both got the COVID-19. Fortunately, they recovered, and I don't wish death or destruction on the Geingob family or anything like that. But he went with the AstraZeneca vaccine knowing that it was ineffective because he's an arrogant son of a gun, and he can never admit when he's wrong. And the U.S. State Department has Namibia on level 4 and strongly advises its citizens to not travel to Namibia because it is so affected with the COVID-19. There were several South Africans who decided to get on a bus and tour Namibia, going from Namibia to South Africa. Well, almost 90% of the bus, and it was filled with South African senior citizens, came back with the COVID-19. That is just not sustainable to do something like that. So the only hope for Namibia is to vote out the SWAPO party. The SWAPO party, as until Gingab, it's not been a racist party, but it's been largely ineffective. It's engaged in like a lot of socialism activity, and it's just been ineffective for the country of Namibia. And it's basically the SWAPO party has ran Namibia into the ground, and the only hope for Namibia is to not vote re-elect the SWAPO party. And I will go ahead and say the only hope for South Africa is to not vote the ANC. If the ANC wins these next municipal elections, if they're allowed to take place, the ANC is working with the IEC committee to not have the elections or to postpone them due to COVID-19. And I can tell you, you guys know that I wear my mask out, I social distance, but I voted. When I voted for the U.S. presidency and the 2020 elections, there was a long line outside, but we were outside. People wore their mask. And you only went a few at a time in the election room. There were a lot of plastic walls there. And when you took off your mask, it was just for a brief second to know that your face matched the photo ID. Then you put your mask back on, and it was fine. There was not an increase of COVID-19 cases during election weekend. This is just a power grab by the ANC because they know that they're probably not going to be legitimately reelected because a lot of people have lost their jobs due to the lockdown. A lot of people have lost their jobs. The ANC has not given out proper unemployment checks to people because they loot the government funds, and banning alcohol and banning tobacco until it got so unpopular. Banning alcohol and tobacco for one's private consumption was just an error, and it outraged a lot of people. Then it outraged the people who have been outraged again for not awarding the Olympic athletes their bonuses. Many black South Africans as well, like Tatiana Schoenmaker and Bianca Buitendog, for winning medals and thought they should have gotten the medals. But and they were outraged over what the ANC Sports and Olympic Committee was going to do. And Gideon Sam made a wrong decision in doing this. He's chairman of the SASOC, the leader of SASOC. So if you guys have any questions or comments, please feel free to type them in. If you got any questions or comments, I will be happy to. And it is not just, okay, it is not just, okay, in Chicago, there are a lot of cops, even the most pro Lori Lightfoot. Lori Lightfoot is the mayor of Chicago, Illinois. A lot of Lori Lightfoot supporters are turning their back on her, and she was kind of given the cold shoulder by the Chicago Police Department because recently a female police officer was shot and killed by two gangbangers who were on probation. They didn't get a jail sentence, they were on probation. Well, they shot and killed a Chicago female police officer, and they wounded her male partner. And the Lori Lightfoot has not given the Chicago police the proper funding, the proper support, or the proper backing that she has needed. And crime is out of control in Chicago right now, and she refuses to do much about it. And I firmly believe that the Chicago Police Union will not endorse her for the next election. She's been a joke. There have been Democrat city councilmen in Chicago that have gone to Newsmax, which is a conservative network, talking about the ineptness of Lori Lightfoot and how crime is just out of control in a lot of Chicago's communities. Now, going to Andrew Cuomo, let me go ahead and say this, okay? He should resign. I think he's a monster. I think he's a psychopath. He should have not sexually harassed those girls, okay? But here's the thing with Andrew Cuomo where he needs to be charged with. He needs to be charged at the very least with involuntary manslaughter, and that was way worse than sexual harassment. More like voluntary manslaughter because there was deliberate cover-up. Erica Holtzkamp says, hello, Brett. Hey, Erica, how are you? There was deliberate cover-up of the COVID-19 deaths in New York nursing homes, and then him well, first of all, he moved the New York patients, COVID-19 patients, from the hospital to the nursing home, but didn't evacuate the patients who didn't have COVID-19. And then on top of that, when New York's hospitals got filled up, the USS Mercy, I believe it was a hospital ship called that, they were on the docks and asked for help. And they said, we can assist you. You can move some COVID-19 patients here. We can help you out. But because it was Trump that was president of the United States at the time, Andrew Cuomo did not want to do that. So he has blood on his hands. It needs to be murder, or at the very least, involuntary manslaughter, to be honest with you. But his most trusted advisor was in on this as well. But over the sexual harassment allegations, Governor Cuomo she has resigned. Over the sexual harassment allegations, but she didn't seem to be too bothered when he refused federal help or federal aid to his hospitals, just because Trump was the president. And then also moving COVID-19 patients into the nursing home without evacuating the non-COVID-19 patients first. And that is it's just outright asinine. Now, I'm very, very critical of COVAX, but Ghana has recently got its first Johnson & Johnson vaccines from the COVAX program. And those vaccines will be good for the Ghanaian people and for any other country trying to stop the spread of COVID-19. So that's good news for Ghana. Malawi has gotten the Johnson & Johnson vaccine as well. And Lazarus Chakwera, I was excited that he got elected as president of Malawi, but he's been a big disappointment. He went with the, yo, Azioba, how are you? But yeah, Chakwera went with the AstraZeneca vaccine, even though there was blatant evidence that about 80 to 90% of Malawi's COVID-19 cases were of the South African strain. And the AstraZeneca vaccine did not do anything for Malawi, and Malawi has faced a severe shortage of nurses because many of the nurses that had that vaccine, the AstraZeneca vaccine, had gotten the South African strain. And Lazarus Chakwera, even though still flew to London for a meeting, because he said Malawi's internet's bad. He could have postponed it till the COVID-19 got better. I mean, I thought he was going to be a good president, but so far he's been a severe disappointment. 132 Gearhead says, finally another live stream. Yeah, I was going to get on a live stream today. Actually, I just didn't know. Had some unexpected things come up this morning, but Chris Wyatt's out of town, and I try not to interfere with Chris Wyatt's or Ronaldo Host's live streams if I can help it. I listened to Conscious Caracles show a little bit with Roman Kabanak. And if you guys want to stay in South Africa, I understand that, and I highly understand it's a beautiful country, and there's a lot you'd miss about it. But Ronaldo Host is staying at the moment. But in these next elections, if the ANC still becomes the majority party and people are still voting for them after as hopeless as the ANC has been, I just don't see any hope for that country, and I would be trying to get out. I mean, I hate to say that, but if people still elect the ANC after all the stunts the ANC has pulled over the years, I would try to get out if the ANC retains majority party status. But like I said, that's my personal opinion. That's not, and if you guys decide to stay, I completely understand that. AfriForum is going to has decided to stay regardless. Ernst Wenzel, Ernst Roots, and I respect that. Tony Nagy says, why listen to anything they say when they can break all the rules? Agreed. I mean, now there is a lot of hypocrisy, and I will agree with that, Tony. There is a lot of hypocrisy in these COVID-19 rules. Obama encouraged people to wear a mask. Joe Biden is basically following Obama's playbook because he was Obama's vice president. But then Obama would not wear a mask for his 60th birthday. But then encouraging others to wear a mask. And that is just outright hypocritical. Now, the mayor of Denver, Colorado, who has a daughter in my home state, Mississippi, he went on to Twitter, this was months ago, who encouraged people to not travel, to wear a mask, to stay home, and do virtual meetings with your family to stop the spread of the COVID. Well, the next thing we know, he hops a plane to Mississippi to see his daughter. Well, the media catches wind of that. The national media, not the state media, the national media. Well, then he has to take a plane back to Denver because his cover's busted. And there were a lot of his biggest supporters that took to Twitter, and rightfully so, and called him a hypocrite. And I agree, leaders must set an example. And if you're not willing to do this yourself, then you have no reason then regulating this on everybody else. Another example, and this is why he's being recalled as governor, Gavin Newsom in California had a major party celebration during the COVID pandemic, rented out a restaurant for himself, and nobody around that dinner table was social distancing or wearing a mask. And that's one reason Gavin Newsom is being recalled. Larry Elder, who is an African-American Republican, there are several people running for governor of California at the moment, including Caitlyn Jenner, formerly known as Bruce Jenner. But Larry Elder right now is leading the pack, and he's finally on the list for governor. But there were a lot of progressives and judges in California that were trying to block his name from being on the ballot. And that is just asinine. But he's leading the pack, and I think Larry Elder will be a good governor? Yes. I think he's more of a libertarian than a Republican. He'll have good economics, but I do worry, because he's such libertarian, that the COVID-19 is going to spread more rapidly, and the cops may not have as much freedom to do their job. He says he's going to, but libertarians sometimes can be worse than progressives in regards to that. But I do think he'll be better than Gavin Newsom, and I'm willing to give Larry Elder a chance for the state of California, if that makes any sense. So, best wishes to Larry Elder. I've read several of his books. He's a very good author. Makes a lot of sense. Can out-argue or out-debate anybody. And I wish Larry Elder nothing but the best in that situation. But yes, leaders must set an example, and those are just a few examples of hypocrisy that has been going on in regards to that. But I can tell you, South Korea has had their daily COVID-19 cases shoot up, averaging 1,700, 1,800, 1,900 cases a day. Not because people are over there are wearing a mask and social distancing when they can over there still, but they're still taking their summer vacations, and they think if I wear a mask and I can social distance, and that's true to a certain point. But like if you go into a hotel room, a lot of hotel you share the same air. So if it's a hotel occupied by 208 people and one person has the COVID-19, it's very, very hard to sleep in a mask. Now, if you've been vaccinated and you can take an air purifier, I can understand that. Those air purifiers can be portable and they can help purify the air in your room. But since summer vacations has happened in South Korea, the COVID-19 daily cases have gone way up, which is one reason that I try my best at the moment not to travel. And those are the statistics. I'm not making these stats up. These are the statistics. Now, I do feel sorry for South African Olympian Wade van Niekerk. He's an excellent Olympian. But after 2016, he won, I believe, the gold medal in Europe. Not in Europe, excuse me, in Rio. He won the gold medal in Rio. But then shortly thereafter, he had to have massive ACL surgery on his knee. And since he's had to have major knee surgery, he's not been as fast. And that's why he came home medalist without a medal this Olympics. Now, he ran very hard. He gave it his best effort. And he's a really good guy. And he says he's a Christian and he puts God first. But when he won his medal about 4 years ago, there were a few racist trolls, black and white, that said some stuff. And the South African media got wind of it, particularly the white racist. And they were going to say they didn't support him because he was colored, it wasn't a white person, white supremacy, yada, yada, yada. Well, Niekerk came back and said, I've had way more whites congratulate me than have said nasty and atrocious things. The majority of South Africans were behind me, regardless of skin color, regardless of race, and to remain positive. So he took to Twitter and had corrected the media about their racist narrative. Now, here's another, not racist, but pro-China narrative of the U.S. media. And this is just sick. They're just talking about how the U.S. barely won the Olympics. They had 39 gold medals to China's 38. That is true. But the United States still won, number one. Number two, the United States had 118 total medals, and China only had, I believe, 83 total medals. So the total medal count, the U.S. won hands down. And one of the other reasons we barely won was because of our woke soccer team. The women's soccer team was predicted to win the gold medal hands down. They weren't even predicted to lose a game in the Olympics. They were predicted to go as far, because they were predicted to just not even have problems. Well, they lost the first game to Sweden. And then in the semifinals, they lost to Canada. Well, it was a bronze medal performance, but it was an embarrassing bronze medal performance. And this is equivalent to the U.S. men's basketball team in 2004 in Athens. They were predicted to win the gold medal by far, but they ended up winning the bronze medal, and it was an embarrassing bronze medal performance at that. Since then, the U.S. men's basketball team has won this year. It was their fourth straight gold medal, but they were not predicted to win the gold medal this year. The gold medal was predicted to either go to Serbia or to Australia or to France or to possibly Spain or Argentina. But hold on, Azioba says, do you think the media plays up racial tensions to avoid debating economic inequality? And there's a little bit of truth to that. I'll get on that in a second, actually. Get back to this, but the U.S. men's basketball team, the first game they played, they lost to France, and people thought the men's basketball team was done. Well, they defied expectations. Greg Popovich, the coach of the U.S. men's basketball team, who's a U.S. Air Force veteran and U.S. Air Force Academy graduate, the players came to him for some suggestions and let the players decide certain plays and things like that. And Popovich took their suggestions seriously, and then they started making better plays and playing better. And that's why they defeated for the final gold medal game. They beat France 87-82, which shocked a lot of people. So even though, yes, it's their fourth straight gold medal, but they dominated Spain, and typically Spain plays the United States very, very close in Olympic basketball. They dominated Spain. The world's strongest Olympian, decathlon gold. Not the decathlon, but South Korea won a medal, a summer Olympic medal, in the bronze medal in the pentathlon, and that was the first bronze medal that South Korea has ever gotten in the pentathlon. Now, South Korea won the gold in men's and women's archery, and the South Korean women's archery team has won a gold medal ever since they made their debut in the 1988 Seoul Olympics. They've won, since 1988, they've won the gold medal. Now, the men's archery team has not won as many consecutive gold medals, but the last 2 or 3 Olympics, they have dominated the archery scene. But let me get to another question about the media. They do flare up racial tensions to avoid economic problems, particularly if the economic problems are caused by progressives. They do flare up racial tension when there's not a lot of news to report. When there's not a lot of news to report, I'm not defending the media, but when there's not a lot of news to report, people don't watch it because there's nothing to report, obviously, and they have to get their television ratings somewhere. Yeah, the Georgian who lifted a total of 488 kilograms was incredible, but honestly, my favorite part of non-U.S. Olympics and the weightlifting was this female Olympian from the Philippines. She represented the Philippines. She's actually in the Filipino Air Force. That's her full-time job. And so when she won gold, and this is the first ever gold medal for the Philippines in any events. They've won several other Olympic medals, but not gold, but she won gold for them. And when the Filipino national anthem was being played, she stood tall and proud. That's what a lot of our athletes needed to do. And our baseball team did, our softball team did. To be fair to the the basketball team in the Olympics, where they mauled Japan for the gold medal, some of them stood reluctantly, I will agree with that, and some of them tried to roll their eyes at the flag, which shouldn't have happened, but they said, we're going to put across any differences of kneeling and standing aside to unite the country behind us, and that took a lot of guts. I will have to admit that. And with the U.S. soccer team, Carly Lloyd, she was the only player for the bronze medal game that stood for the national anthem. And she stood, and she scored 2 goals in the U.S. women's team's 4-3 win over Australia. Now, Megan Rapinoe, the nasty, vile Megan Rapinoe, who I don't like, she scored the other 2 goals. But Subway, there are a lot of Subway customers who have boycotted Subway or who have written nasty letters to Subway's headquarters about how they should pull Megan Rapinoe out of their Subway ads. And I like Subway, but I'm not going to eat at a Subway franchise until Megan Rapinoe stops becoming the spokeswoman for Subway. And that is what needs to happen. I mean, she is a vile human being. She likes to create trouble. She likes to cause controversy. And they say another reason they're kneeling for the national anthem is to protest unequal pay in men's and women's sports. Here's the thing. The WNBA, for whatever reason, does not get good ratings, so the players don't make as much because it doesn't get good ratings and it doesn't get good attendance. Okay? And it's not always sexism. Typically, the WNBA had seasons when the NBA wasn't going on, and, you know, people were tired of basketball that season. A lot of typically sports that go on when the season of a typical sport's not going on, they don't fare well, typically. That's just like the XFL with football. But the WNBA does not get, and they would be bankrupt if it wasn't for the U.S. government typically bailing them out. They have yet to generate a profit for any season that they've had. Well, here's the other side to athletes, non-athletes. Female models earn it may be more than 4 times, it might be close to 10 times. They earn a substantial higher amount more than male models do. And the U.S. women's soccer team is not addressing that. They are not addressing that part of the unequal pay. And yes, South Korea has one of the most unequal pays in the world in regards to men and women. Not the United States, South Korea does, but a lot of women want it that way, and I'll tell you why. South Korea is the only country in the world, as far as I know, that has a female day, where women can say it's the wrong time of the month and miss 1 day of work per month. Obviously, men don't have that, because we can't ovulate. These narcissists should be deplatformed, I agree. Very negative influence on society. And if the equal pay comes, then that's going to go away, number one. And I can tell you from living in South Korea, a lot of men's work is a lot more monitored and scrutinized than women's work. So, and in Japan, it's the same way. They know that if equal pay comes, a lot of that's going to go. So, you know, which one's more equal? I mean, I'm asking you. I'm not saying men and women shouldn't get paid the same thing. What I am saying is, in those two societies, if equal pay does come, those things are going to go. Yeah, Tony Nagy says, Ozioba, well said. Yeah, I mean, these narcissists should be deplatformed, but that's not going to happen, particularly when I believe you have Obama pulling the puppet strings of Joe Biden. I don't have proof of that, and I don't know that for sure. I think that's the case. But what I do know is when D'Souza made a documentary, Obama's America, which some people said it was anti-Obama, I didn't necessarily think it was. I thought it was just showing people, if Obama had his anti-colonialism platform, what would happen. And it told Obama's life story. I also read the book Obama's America. I didn't necessarily see it as anti-Obama. Okay, he made that film, but then the White House issued a press release telling people not to watch that film, and they looked for wrongdoing on Dinesh D'Souza, and he violated a campaign finance law, which D'Souza did. He gave a candidate more money than the campaign allowed, than federal law allowed. But that law has been largely a blue law till Dinesh D'Souza got charged with it. D'Souza was the first person to be indicted for this, let alone being arrested and convicted. And that is why when Donald Trump was president of the U.S., he pardoned Dinesh D'Souza, because, you know, that law has never been enforced until D'Souza. And D'Souza had a liberal pro-Obama lawyer that said, I like Obama. And some of his supporters did too, but they said they should not, the only reason they're going after you is because of this movie. They are not, I mean, if you didn't make this movie, this would not be going on. And it was just, like I said, the whole thing was just ridiculous. And yeah, Tony, I agree. Dinesh D'Souza is awesome. So if if Biden has his way, now Biden is not as bad. I'll tell you, he is not as bad as Kamala, and Obama wasn't either as bad as Kamala Harris, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, and AOC. If Biden has to leave due to old age or due to dementia, which I firmly believe he has, then Kamala's going to be president. Probably AOC is going to be the vice president. And this country is going to get ran to hell in a handbasket. You see what's going on in Venezuela? If AOC is the vice president and Kamala is the president, unless something drastically changes, we are going to become more like Venezuela. And Venezuela, I mean, the food shortage, Venezuela sits on oil reserves, but they're having power outages and oil supply issues. They're having to import oil for the first time ever in its history. Never mind, they sit on one of the world's largest oil reserves. Dinesh D'Souza's wife, Debbie D'Souza, who is a Venezuelan, has pointed that out. Yeah, heaven forbid Kamala gets to be president. I agree. But I haven't checked to see who the latest U.S. ambassador is, though, but Lana Marks needed to be recalled as the U.S. ambassador. And she was appointed by Trump, and Lana had a lot of business sense, but she didn't have a lot of international relations sense or political sense, and business and international relations don't go hand in hand. Sometimes she wouldn't address the farm murder issues. She didn't address how Ramaphosa was not willing to meet with her very much, which I don't even know if he met with her once ever since she was appointed ambassador, and how South Africa, not South Africans, but the ANC government votes against the United States every chance they get in the UN. They only vote with the U.S. about 17 to 20% of the time at the most. That is one reason AfriForum said it would be okay if the U.S. put sanctions on South Africa. Kamala has lost popularity, even amongst Dems. That is true. She has, and most Democrats don't like AOC either. Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, but I wonder if they've got dirt on them because nobody will stand up to them. Nancy Pelosi won't stand up to them. The only Democrat that has been willing to stand up to those goons has been Joe Manchin. Joe Manchin of West Virginia has been the only Democrat that I'm aware of that has taken considerable stance against Squad. Now, when the Cuban protests were going on and AOC blamed the United States, so did Ilhan Omar. There were some Florida moderate Democrats in the state of Florida that bashed the Squad, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, AOC, because of that. So there were some Florida Democrats that took a stand on it, and actually they got reported in Politico for doing that and saying that Biden lost a golden opportunity not standing with the protesters any more than he did in Cuba, which he should have done. And this affects South Africa because the ANC has a love fest with communist Cuba and Fidel Castro. And I can tell you, I've read a book, The Real Fidel Castro, which was written by a bodyguard who used to be his bodyguard, and he lost favor with Fidel Castro, and he had to go into exile in the United States because he feared for his life. Make America Florida. Tony Nagy, I agree. I mean, I think Ron DeSantis would be a better president than Joe Biden. I firmly agree. Ozzy says, do you think sanctions actually work? Yes and no. I do think they do. Look at what's going on in Venezuela, and it's made the world recognize what is going on. The problem with Cuba, for whatever reason, the world besides the United States, had a love fest with Fidel Castro and Che Guevara. And so Europe didn't back us on what we were doing with Cuba, and Canada didn't either. And typically Canada does. Typically the UK does, but they didn't here. And it really didn't work for Cuba. Now, it worked for Venezuela for whatever reason. The entire world was behind the South Africa getting rid of apartheid, and the sanctions worked there. But unless the United States has the world's backing on the reverse apartheid that's going on, I am not so sure that the sanctions would work. Now, with that being said, here's what the United States can do. Trump halfway did it, but not recalling Lana Marks as ambassador was a mistake. Trump made a tweet about raising awareness on South Africa's farm murders, and that created more considerable interest in the United States, what's going on in South Africa. And before the COVID, people were paying more attention than they did in the past. Fox News covered The farm murders protest, and not just Fox News, ABC News did, so did CNN. I have the articles to prove it. But when the COVID hit, obviously everybody's just concerned about their own lives, their jobs, their own nation. So what the U.S. government could do before sanctions is to raise awareness of it and to not just encourage AfriForum to go to the United States, but to go to Canada, go to England, go to Spain, go to Italy, South Korea, Japan, and raise awareness of what's going on there as well, and raise awareness to them. In South Korea, they would listen because white South African pilots from the South came to help South Korea in the Korean War. I don't know how much interest it would generate, but one, the government would listen. That I do know. Number two, there are plenty of church institutions, particularly the church that I went to, that would listen to Ernst Roots or Ernst Wenzel, Conscious Caracal, or several other people. So that's what I know would happen. And the United States could encourage AfriForum to go to those places and to raise awareness. And then if the world, by some small chance, gets behind that, I agree. I'm okay with, honestly, with the CIA meeting with the Mossad leader, because Mossad is Israeli, and Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East. And they counter terrorists like Hamas and Hezbollah, and so I'm okay with the CIA and Mossad being allied. I mean, Israel, I don't know what the discussion would be. I don't have access to classified information, Tony. I have no idea. And quite frankly, as a regular citizen, I would not want to know what the discussion would be. Unless by some chance that just peaceful political opponents started getting annihilated, then I believe citizens would have the right to know, but I highly doubt under those circumstances it would be political opinions. It would be trying to annihilate terrorists, I would hope, which I think would happen, to be honest with you. And yeah, just the situation in Venezuela is a mess. They have the people, what you call collectivos, and what the collectivos do, they're basically convicted rapists, convicted murderers they didn't really get pardoned, but they got released from prison, and they were told by the Maduro government, and before Maduro, Hugo Chavez, who ruled Venezuela, who supposedly was a champion of poor people, by the way, but he died with $1 billion in his pocket. He had a net worth of $1 billion when he was gone, and he was a politician. But Maduro and Chavez armed the collectivos with guns and took away guns from the average private Venezuelan citizen. That's one reason the ANC is so pro-Maduro. They're doing a lot of the same things in South Africa, or trying to. Well, the collectivos would go and kill peaceful political opponents or peaceful opposition politicians. And there's documented evidence of that. And yeah, that's just, that is what's going on in Venezuela and has been going on for a long time. Political opponents are being kidnapped from their homes in the middle of the night. The families have no idea where they are. If they're female political opponents that are killed, or if it's a political opponent's wife, then typically the prisons, the women's prisons, have male guards, and the male guards fondle and sexually assault the female political prisoners a lot of times. And it's just a sad, sick, sadistic situation like that. Now, on a more positive and peaceful note, the U.S. baseball team did really good in the Olympics. Yes, they won the silver medal. In the gold medal game, they lost to Japan 2-0, and in the first round, they lost to Japan 7-6. They had a lead most of the game, but Japan came back on them. But here is the difference. For the Olympics, the Major League Baseball does not stop their season because of the Olympics. Japan's baseball league did, and South Korea's baseball league typically does. They stopped their seasons and allowed their major league, the South Korean professional players and the Japanese professional players, to compete in the Olympics. Well, the United States didn't do that. Almost all the U.S. players were minor league players, AA players or AAA players. Now, there were a few American players that play on Japanese teams that were allowed to come because their season was interrupted and play for the United States. But that wasn't most of the roster. So the United States won the silver medal. The Dominican Republic won the bronze medal. And the Dominican Republic had a similar situation. Most of their players are in the major leagues. They're better players. But they couldn't come. South Korea won 4th place. Japan won the gold medal. But Japan and South Korea used major league talent. The United States and the Dominican Republic did not. And the United States walked away with the silver medal, and the Dominican Republic walked away with the bronze medal. Now, with that being said, unless South Africa cricket just changes, I'm not going to support the cricket team. That it's become too politicized, and there's a lot of people, even though the Springboks beat the British and Irish Lions, because they have a good captain in Sia Khaleesi, and then Mapipi is a very good player, but as soon as Sia and Mapipi get hurt, and which I hope they don't, they are going to get some black players that aren't as good as Sia and Mapipi, and the quota system's going to prohibit the rugby coaches from benching them if they're not playing well, and the Boks are not going to do as good. I hope I'm wrong, but that a lot of people are not tuning into South African rugby, because even though the Boks did win the 2019 Rugby World Cup, a lot of people are not predicting good things in the future, and they're being cynical about it because of this quota system, because a lot of people believe the quota system is what cost South Africa the 2015 World Cup, easily. And 85% of black South Africans oppose this quota system in South African rugby and South African cricket. But then you go to Bafana, South Africa's soccer team, and that soccer team is all black, and nobody says anything. And there's no quota system in soccer. And Bafana typically stinks it up. I mean, they lost in the Olympics. It was a terrible performance. The first 3 COVID-19 cases in that 2020 Olympics were 2 Bafana players and 1 Bafana coach. And they lost to Japan 1-0 in the first game. Now, they played well against France, but they had France 3-2 towards the, 2-1 towards the end of the game. And in the last 5 or 10 minutes, France scored 2 unexpected goals to win the game. I mean, it was just a horrible performance by Bafana in the Olympics. And Bafana has not done anything for South Africa in a very, very long time. So, that's that. Anyways, I'm going to end it there, guys. Thank you guys for tuning in. Thanks for the 5 likes. Thanks for the people who've tuned in. I might be back in another hour or 2 for another live stream, but I don't know yet. I got to see how the rest of my day goes. Hope everybody's doing well. Take care. God bless you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.